everyone, it's Taylor here. Today it's time to dive into the Halloween season as we make this fun trick-or-treat card with the surprise glow-in-the-dark element. So let's get started with the supplies we'll be using. It all starts with the Pick of the Patch background. It's a cling and clear combo, so the cling stamp is the pumpkins, and then it comes with the clear stamps that include the faces and the small stems for stamping at the top of each pumpkin. I'll also be using the Sentiment Strip Duo, along with the Sentiment Trick or Treat from the Pennant Parade Halloween set. I have the Twinkle Twinkle background that I'll be using to create that glow-in-the-dark element. I'll need some Versamark and powder tool along with the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder. I'll be using my blender brushes to blend within the background, along with pea pod, pineapple, blue corn, guava, sweet potato pie, candy corn, and Oreo inks. I'll also be sharing a tip using press and seal to keep your images together before you adhere them onto your project. I'll be starting with the Pick of the Patch background, setting it up in my MISTI, and stamping it first with candy corn ink, and then I'll be using a darker pumpkin ink to highlight portions of the pumpkins and give myself a two-toned, more dimensional look when I stamp these pumpkins onto the sugar cube cardstock. Once that's finished, we will go ahead and die cut the pumpkins. I like to do the die cutting first because then I can see exactly where those stems need to be placed. If you plan to die cut your pumpkins, I suggest die cutting prior to stamping the pumpkin stems. If you're not going to die cut, then you can stamp the stems right away after you stamp the background. I place the stem onto an acrylic block and I'm stamping each of the pumpkins with pea pod ink. Then I've used my negative die cut piece from die cutting the pumpkins out, and I'm placing them back within like I'm putting a puzzle back together, and then stamping 3 faces at one time. And then I can place more pumpkins inside and easily stamp several at once. I decided to create a mini slim card which measures 3.5 by 6 when folded, so I'm cutting a layer for that size at 3.25 by 5 3/4. Then I'm going to use my blender brushes to blend a nighttime spooky sky using several different colors of ink. I'm starting with the lightest color at the bottom, and I've blended pineapple across the bottom portion of the cardstock. Then I'm coming back with the candy corn next and guava after that. And then I'll go back with the sweet potato pie to go in between the guava and candy corn. I'll be using the darkest color blue corn across the top and then coming back with the guava to blend the sweet potato pie together with the blue corn. Once the nighttime sky is blended, I'll be stamping it with the Twinkle Twinkle background. I'm setting this up in the MISTI, grabbing the stamp with the top of the lid, and then conditioning the cardstock with my powder tool to make sure that embossing powder only sticks where I want. I'm stamping the image with Versamark ink, and then I'll be using glow-in-the-dark embossing powder over the top of the stars. Glow-in-the-dark powder is applied just like any other embossing powder. You place it over the top of your image and then use your heat tool to heat it up, and any of those pieces that you've embossed will glow in the dark just like this when you turn the lights off. It's a really cool effect, and I can see myself using this glow-in-the-dark powder a lot this Halloween. Now I have the Rolling Hills grass that I've die cut, and I'm going to add a little bit of dimension by blending that with pea pod ink. I do this a lot using a tone-on-tone effect, the same color cardstock with the same color ink. Now I'm going to arrange the pumpkins that I die cut across the front of my card. When I have them in place, I've grabbed a piece of press and seal, and I can use that to keep the entire scene together and allow me to add adhesive to the back portions where I want it to stay down on the card base. I did not add adhesive to the back of the 3 pumpkins with the faces because I knew I wanted to pop those up on foam squares for a little added dimension. So I'm adding those foam squares and then placing those 3 pumpkins down. Now I'm going to add that panel that we created to a slimline card base. I mentioned before it measures 3.5 by 6, and I created this one in the landscape orientation. Now we'll finish with the sentiment. I'm placing that into my MISTI and stamping it onto the grid paper so that I can use a negative of the die cut to make sure my sentiment is going to be stamped perfectly straight within that banner. A lot of times I will cut my negative piece from a different color so that it's easier for me to line the sentiment up within that opening. I'll finish by popping the sentiment up with foam squares, and now the card is done. It glows in the dark and it's ready to give to a friend. Thanks for creating this fun project with me today. You can find all of these products at the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com.